Thanks for tuning in to Canada's Farm Show. I am your host, Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel, farmer from Mossbank, Saskatchewan, and I'm quite excited to be the moderator for today's panel. I've been looking forward to this panel discussion since the onset of our online event. This is the Pioneers Panel, a discussion dedicated to honoring the history of agriculture. I have three individuals here with me today on this topic, two of which are joining me on the big stage, and we have another joining us virtually. They're quite the characters. I've already heard enough stories to last the day. Hopefully they'll retell some of those. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their agricultural background, and then they're going to share some of the work that their companies are doing to honor agriculture and keep pace with innovation. So, IZAAK, can we start with you? Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and your background in agriculture.
Well, I guess it started a long time ago, turn of the century, as a matter of fact. My grandfather was a son of a farmer, and in those days when you had more than a few children, the oldest child would get the farm and the other ones would be sent out to get educated and take a profession. And in his case, he became a blacksmith. And when my father was indentured with him as an apprentice, he married his daughter. They started a blacksmith shop in the next village. And in the 1950s, he immigrated to Canada right after the war. Everyone understands, of course, that people were looking for better things in those days.
Sure.
They had experienced some pretty bad stuff. So he came to Canada, sold his business to one of his employees, and started Dutch blacksmith shop in Regina. That eventually got turned over to myself and my brother-in-law, Fritz DeLeo, and we changed the name to Dutch Industries at that time, as we were slowly getting out of the sort of farm repair stuff and more into building buildings, building farm equipment, and servicing industry. So it's and now it's been passed on to the fourth generation. My children, one of my children is running Dutch Industries. Another one has taken an interest in Vale Industries in Indian Head, and we have another one in BC who has taken in the seed brake business. So we're carrying on.
Very good. In my hometown of Mossbank, we have a blacksmith shop at the museum, and it seems to be one of those long lost arts. But certainly a blacksmith and a farmer would be very good friends. But there may be some viewers that don't fully understand what a blacksmith is. Would you mind sharing that?
Well, it is somewhat misunderstood, because the blacksmithing that you see nowadays is like horseshoeing and doing some fancy ironwork. But matter of fact, in Europe, it was kind of like a mechanical engineering technologist. He was able to design trusses, build farm buildings, do plumbing, heating, look after cook stoves, that sort of thing. In this part of the world, it's always like sharpening plowshares, sharpening cultivator shovels. We did lots of that in the early days. It's kind of a thing of the past now. But still, it had a thorough knowledge of metallurgy, which of course helped us. I'll give you an example. For instance, the Massey Diskers had often broke wheels because of our metallurgy knowledge. We put an alloyed axle in there, and then they didn't break anymore.
Strengthen it.
And that's the kind of stuff that we used to do.
Very good. Good. Well, thank you for the history. Dave, why don't we move over to you? Why don't you introduce yourself? Share with us your agriculture story.
Yes, I'm Dave Weber. I have been in agriculture most of my life. I've had a 10-year stint with Sasktel and going to school and getting a degree, but I've been with the farm show probably going on 27 to 30 years. I think I started in 1977 as a just sort of an advisor for a good friend of mine. And from then I went on and became the chairman of the International Business Center eventually becoming the chairman of the farm show, and then becoming the president of Regina Exhibition Park. So I've had a long history of being around this park and enjoying the people and enjoying the industries that are going on, and many memories. Currently, my son and I farm just northwest of Regina. We run a large grain farm. We grow a lot of lentils, canola, and durum, and are very much enjoying the rain that is coming today.
Norbert, can we ship the microphone over to you? And can you share with us your agriculture story?
I guess agriculture has been in my family 100 and some years, and maybe a few hundred years before that in Europe. My grandfather on my mother's side had a master's degree in agriculture from Brussels in the very early 1900s, and was one of the first certified seed growers in what was called the Northwest Territories of Saskatchewan at that time. Through the 30s and 40s, of course, our farm was affected by the war and by the years of the 30s. So I grew up on a fairly poor farm, southeast Saskatchewan, but was fortunate enough to go to university and took ag engineering in the late 60s, early 70s, and worked in various design elements of industry, I guess, for a few years, and then moved back to the farm in 1985 when my father was retiring. And over the early years of my farming, I became passionate about seeding and very displeased with how we were putting canola in the ground in particular. And so designing a better machine for putting canola in the ground has been my passion for 30 years now, I guess. So in 1991, I filed for the first patent, which was a terrain following opener that was first built on the SeedHawk machine and then later on the Seedmaster. And over the years, I guess I've probably filed for 50 patents since then. So it's part of my daily routine, and I still enjoy doing it. One of my latest ventures was the DOT power platform that was an autonomous seeder that I started developing through Seedmaster, and then it ended up attracting Raven Industries, and they had to have it, I guess. So we ended up selling to them. So it's I was just saying before the program that it's probably my 30th year of being a display customer for what was the Farm Progress Show through most of those years.
Thanks, Norbert, for sharing your stories around innovation. Canada's Farm Show, I believe it's 43 years that we're celebrating this year. And on a typical year, we would welcome 30,000 people would come to the grounds here in Regina. We'd have local people from across Canada, and we always welcomed our international guests. So the show looks very different this year than it has before, and I found it really interesting on our website. You can go and find a video that showcases a lot of the footage of days gone by and farm shows gone by. And Dave, you've been a part of this show for many years, 27 of the 43, I think you shared with me. Yeah. Can you give us, a sense of what has changed, not necessarily just this year where we are on a virtual staged and socially distanced, but what do you remember from shows gone by, and what's changed?
What has changed, and what has been one of the great things about the farm show has been the innovations that have come through, whether it's the new invention center or the people coming to the business to do business here and buy machines. It's always been the young person or the single person that has a great idea. He would come into the new inventions area and broadcast that idea, and it would go from there. So while we did start off as a smaller farm show, it was always well attended by that 30 to 40,000 people. But many people would come first. They would come to the new inventions, they'd look what was there, then they'd go to the main manufacturers and see what was there. And we carried that tradition for many years, and it just got bigger and bigger. But what really became bigger was the business center and the buying from abroad, where the people were, whatever company it was, whether it was a Burgo or a Flexicoil or a Seedmaster or whatever it is, they were able to show their machines to the world and make deals right then and there, and those would take place and be shipped out, which created employment for Saskatchewan. And it just shows how big agriculture is in Saskatchewan and how much it has done for us. The farm show was always a highlight in June, and many people, would hear and would come in, and either we'd have a rain and people would come in, or something would always work around, so we had a good show. So it was a wonderful time, met so many great people, and it's good you're doing this now, but it was, and it will be again, a wonderful show.
I couldn't agree more, Dave. Actually, my birthday is in June and right around the farm show date. So I was always pretty convinced that the farm show was a birthday party for me. It also seemed to land right close to Father's Day. So the timing was suspect for that as well.
Yeah.
Dave, can you share with us any memories of Dutch Industries and how long you may have been attending the show as a company?
Well, I've been attending the shows on these grounds since the 50s, of course, and the farm show itself only came later on. But it always was a great place for farm people. Even before the actual Canadian Farm Show started, there was always chickens, ducks, and what have you in some of the buildings where the stadium now stands, and grain samples and that sort of thing. But definitely for Dutch Industries, it was always a great place to show the product. And it did, we weren't really looking out to the rest of the world as much as a company. People came to us, and as a result of being in Regina, I don't think people realize how much of an effect that's had on businesses in Western Canada, because we have shown the world how to grow crops in dry conditions, tough conditions. And we've been a leader in that worldwide. So that results in us now exporting to other countries, Australia, Kyrgyzstan, South Africa, all over the world, basically. And it certainly is a showcase where we can show very easily, and people come to us, and we don't have to go to them.
I guess the weather is a benefit to us, because if a new innovation or a new piece of equipment can withstand the extreme weather conditions that farmers deal with here in Saskatchewan, it will be well suited to other places around the world. Norbert, did you want to address that as well?
Well, first of all, I think Regina is ideally suited as a center. We had the luxury of establishing a new business for agriculture in 2002, 2003, and we looked all around, and really there's no place any more sense than Regina, and Regina, of course, Trans-Canada Highway is where we ended up. But it's really the center of one of the world's large dryland farm areas. There's probably bigger areas in Russia and maybe Kazakhstan, but in most of the world, this is where like IZAAK was saying, the tough machines are designed, and it is the severe weather conditions that we have that helped to force us to design better equipment, I think, over the last 100 years or so.
It's a pretty resilient industry.
It is. When we go to shows in Australia or Eastern Europe, we find a lot of the displays there for our type of agriculture are displayed in those areas as well. And Saskatchewan's well known in the world, actually, for seeding equipment and tillage equipment.
I'm so proud. I've traveled many places around the world, and we'll often see pieces of equipment and innovation that came from Saskatchewan. And my heart swells with pride when I see that. And I'd be sure to tell everybody that that's where it came from. Traveling, you want to wear a Canadian flag, but it doesn't hurt to have a Saskatchewan flag on you as well. You know, when we think about the agriculture industry and we think about days gone by, there's a phrase that goes, the good old days. And it's almost always said with an eye roll or a sigh afterwards. Can we talk a little bit about the good old days of agriculture? Was there anything good about the good old days of agriculture? Go ahead.
I think the good things were the relationships that we had. You know, there were more farmers.
Mm-hmm.
We all got along with each other fairly well. Of course, we were in the repair business for a long time and got to see them when they were in trouble. But nevertheless, we had a one-on-one relationship, which is more difficult nowadays. But it was more pleasant, I think. It wasn't big business. It was people meeting people. So that's the part I miss, kind of.
If I had one thing to say about agriculture is when I started is I could fix anything. If I had a Massey discer and it did break an axle, I was able to get that axle and replace it. Or if something went wrong, I was able to fix it within no time. Now, with the technology we have, which I love, I would never go back. I love the technology, but I have to usually call somebody and we have to get a computer set up and we find out what's wrong. So there's the good old days, they were great. Maybe it was a little slower. Right now, the pace is fast. We have no room for error. Everything has to be done on time, but it's a wonderful life. It's just the best. Farming is just the best way you can go. I love it.
It's wonderful. And Norbert, for you, when you think of the good old days, what do you think of?
Well, a message I try to preach a bit is a lot of our younger farmers or city friends aren't aware of the great advancements that have been done on the prairies, the technology, the plant breeding, and the chemistry that's been brought in. If we'd had weather like we did in the last 2 days when it was 30 plus and windy and very dry soil conditions, if we did that with the technology of the 30s, it would have been a complete dust bowl, the same as the 30s. And so there's a lot of people don't understand that things have vastly improved environmentally on the farm. And there are pluses and minuses with everything, but there's definitely a lot of pluses.
Norbert, you bring up such a great point. One of the other demographics that joins us on the grounds at Canada's Farm Show is the general consumer. Somebody who's very distanced from the agriculture that we know today. You know, we can get together and brag about the incredible innovations, the scientific technology, the electronics that we can hardly even fix anymore. And it's truly an exciting time to be in agriculture. I think any young person out there looking for an industry that is advanced and welcomes innovation should be looking at agriculture. But that story is a very challenging one for us to share with consumers. And farmers are not typically out there sharing our stories when it comes to the newest innovation. And we didn't realize that we had to. You know, IZAAK, you talked about how there used to be a lot more farmers than there was today. Yeah. So we didn't share these stories about what we were doing because we were all doing them. Do you have any personal experiences talking with consumers or people who are distanced from the farm, and has anything that they've said or questions that they've asked shocked you?
Oh, for sure. I belong to a church, and most of the members are not farmers. And you realize there's a lot of ignorance out there as to what actually happens on the farm, especially with farm animals and that sort of thing. My daughter's a teacher, so she brings chicks to school, and the kids don't get a chance to see that anymore.
They don't.
And so actually the whole school benefits from that in the end, because they all come to her class and to see the chicks. But it makes you realize how few people are really in contact with agriculture. And we do need to be mindful of that. It is going to influence on how we get viewed. There's definitely not as much support for farmers as there used to be. and we will have restrictions placed on what we can do and what we can't do. It's kind of scary, actually.
Dave, have you experienced some of that confusion as well?
It's been with us ever since I think the farm show started, or well before, when when we have different people of different sex, doing work in Regina, or what it is, whether it's a government job or whatever, understanding each other's work or what we do. But one of the most interesting ones lately is I happen to farm right beside a highway. And so many times now, when we have a beautiful crop of canola just completely out there blooming, I will see many ethnic cultures sitting out there taking pictures, clawing their way through the canola, or to take a picture, something like that. So I think people are awed by what we do sometimes, but at the same time, I agree, there's always more understanding. But farming is a business. It's a big business, and we're responsible for that. And we have to show what we do and how well we do it. And we have been doing that by shows like this.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity for us to reach consumers and ask them questions. Norbert, I know you've had some experiences speaking with consumers and people who are unfamiliar about agriculture. Do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, I guess I'm drawing a bit of a blank there, but in terms of our family, the passing of knowledge and information from one generation to the next, I'm fortunate to have had all my kids involved in, particularly in the business, and my son-in-law. And my son-in-law started farming with no farming background to speak of, and he's nailed it. He's good at it, and he's bought a bunch of land since he's taken over. And so there is an opportunity for young people, and with not very much, and doing well in agriculture.
So when thinking about the lessons learned over the years, is there a piece of advice that you'd like to leave to the next generation of farmers or the next generation of industry leaders? It's important for us, I think, to speak with generations before us and hear from those lessons learned and heed that advice. Anything that you could share?
It's hard to tell. If you look back as to how things developed, I think the biggest thing is to keep communicating with each other, share problems with people who maybe can solve them for you. Because certainly that's what, in our business, that's what made us move along. It's ultimately the farmer coming to you and saying, we have a problem. And I think in Norbert's case as well, probably having trouble with the canola seed being at the right depth and what have you, got him all excited to make something better. And in our case, it was exactly the same thing. And it not only farmers, but also we need to work together with each other as manufacturers. Where our family came from in Europe, that's a standard way of doing things, is you make groups of industry work together. That in the beginning here was more difficult, but it's starting to happen now. Like we make parts for Degelman, we make parts for other people as well, Depker and other people like that. So I would say we need to band together to be able to solve the problem.
Work together.
Yep.
Yeah. Norbert, you were saying something?
That filled it in quite well. I guess one thing I try to repeat is don't forget about our failures over the years. We have to always build on our failures, and don't forget about history. There's too often a tendency to rewrite history, and it should always be taken as it is, and adjust your future according to history.
Very good. And Dave, words of advice for the next generation?
Somebody way smarter than me that said this, but necessity is the mother of invention. And I look at my colleagues here, and I look at the sprayer technology, and I look at the air seeding technology and the deep banders and the different things. These are technologies that had to come due to our adverse weather conditions and our spraying things that had to be done in the wind. And my thought to anyone is never stop learning. We came from somewhere. We just have to keep on learning and getting better at what we do. We just don't have a choice. We just have to do that.
Gotta keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking.
Now, there's one further thing I'd like to add is also follow the science. In general, that's not as easy as it sounds. It seems very simple, but a lot of people have ideas that aren't based on science. We've developed when we were working with low draft technology, for instance, the shape that actually drafts the least is not what anybody wants to buy. So if you want to put a word out there, is follow the science, get the testing done, follow the testing. It's not, we shouldn't just have an opinion unless it's based on facts. And then there is a lot of information out there, farmer to farmer, that isn't based on facts. It's a little bit scary sometimes.
You know, that's a good reminder. It's a great reminder for me as well. I work a lot with the general public, trying to share with them the science, the marriage of science and agriculture and how we work together. And I don't often maybe take a look in the mirror and see some of the unrecognized biases that we may have in agriculture ourselves. For me, it's always been when you know better, you do better. Agriculture has made some mistakes in the past. So when I'm out there talking to consumers about all the great things that agriculture is delivering and adapting the latest technology, I have to take a minute to own some of the mistakes that we've made. And when we recognize the mistakes that we've made, we can do better. And I've come to terms with the fact that consumers do have a spotlight on our industry, and we need to own some of those mistakes and maybe acknowledge that we don't necessarily have a halo over our head as an industry. And we must just keep trucking forward and accepting the science as it comes and learning from our past mistakes. So we are now what we hope to believe is in some alleviation of the COVID restrictions. And the world is looking to agriculture to be part of the recovery from the pandemic. We know that agriculture is a driving force in the Canadian economy and around the globe. And the spotlight will continue to be on our industry to be part of that recovery. And I'm wondering if any of you have, some insight into which aspects of agriculture might bear the brunt of that responsibility. It's quite a significant value chain that is agriculture, right from farming and the production and the processing, the manufacturing, the industry, the logistics. There's so many pieces to this puzzle. Will one or more of us bear the brunt of the responsibility for COVID recovery?
Well, we see how fragile agriculture can be within our own government and things that happen. But the producer, with the help of the manufacturers that are designing and building the equipment for us, we can produce the product, and we will produce the product for sale. And it will be our logistics as we are landlocked to get it out there. But certainly, I think we are working in unison with everyone to market the product, grow the product, and also to have that technology that makes it easier for us. So it is everyone working together that we will beat this situation.
Very good. And that's an excellent way for us to wrap up this session. Gentlemen, we're all out of time. It has been just an absolute pleasure to visit with you and share some of your thoughts, heed some of your advice. I will take that upon my shoulders. Thanks to you as well, Norbert, for joining us virtually. A pleasure to have you here. And thanks to our viewers for joining us for the Pioneers panel. Stay tuned.
There's an innovative spirit in Saskatchewan. We make it work, no matter what, and always find a way to stay connected to the future. Sasktel will be there to help our province push the bounds of possibility, building on our foundations to take the next leap in network technology and investing in a future that's more creative, innovative, and connected than ever before. Sasktel is invested in Saskatchewan.